Welcome to this edition of Diligence Inside America's Boardrooms. I'm TK Kerstetter, and I'll be your host for today's show. Today, we're going to be talking about the SEC renews focus on Dodd-Frank executive comp issues. And joining me is someone who is going to update us on this topic. Please welcome Bob Romanchek, who's the partner and senior consultant for Meridian Compensation Partners. Welcome back, Bob.
Hello, TK. Thank you. Glad to be here.
I'm getting this real sense when I listen to some of the discussions that are going on between the Biden administration and the SEC agenda discussions. And it looks like there's going to possibly be a renewed focus on the Dodd-Frank executive compensation statutes that were never finalized. So I'm hoping that you can sort of update us on what might be coming down the pike and also what compensation committees should be aware of.
Right, TK. Thank you. Exactly. If you go back to 2010, seems so long ago, so much has happened. The Dodd-Frank statute, there were a number of items in that statute that pertain to executive compensation. There are two very material items still left open that have not been finalized. All that need happen is there's about a 90-day period, 60-day comment period, 30 days thereafter. All that has to happen is the SEC posts on the Federal Register the new rules, and after that period, they become law. So these have already been passed by Congress back in 2010. No one has to agree with anything politically. They just need to be finalized by posted. And actually, back in 2015, there were these two rules I'm going to mention in a moment. Proposed rules came out, and they just let them expire without finalizing. There are so many issues and problems. But thinking about what has happened with this recent presidential election, the SEC had been controlled by the Republicans. And now, of course, with the turnover administration, there is a Democrat majority. A new SEC chair has been named back in April and then finalized again for a full term in June. And with that, the staff is fully staffed up, a Democrat majority. And so you would think the rules might be drafted a little differently than under Republican rule. But that's yet to be seen. And so the two rules that I'm talking about are, number one, the clawback rules under Dodd-Frank, not under Sarbanes-Oxley. And there's another rule, a pay-for-performance proxy disclosure rule, which I'll get to in a minute. However, what has happened recently under the Republicans, at the end of last year, they came out with their calendar that is actually posted on the internet so we can all see it. And they had some priorities there. These two items were both deemed as priorities. However, the rules were never finalized. They got distracted by impeachment, election, who knows what. But it's not an exciting thing to write regulations, clearly. So probably not their highest priority. So now what's happened and what's changed and why are we talking about this? So the new SEC, so to speak, has also come out with a new spring 21 regulatory flexible agenda. And under this agenda, they too have identified issues that are going to come out shortly. But the one thing that they have done differently that is really helping us here is they also have provided specific targeted dates for issuance of the proposed rules. So that's a new occurrence, and we have something to actually look forward to and try to plan a little bit. And that's the point of this discussion. And although there's a couple of items out for October, really these two big exec comp related issues are scheduled to be released in April of 2022. And April is really not that far away when you're thinking about final clawback rules. Do keep in mind under Sarbanes-Oxley, prior to Dodd-Frank, there is a statutory clawback that applies to just the CEO and CFO. It goes back 1 year. You need negligence for that to kick in. Bottom line, there's not a lot of teeth to it, not examples of dollars actually being clawed back under those Sarbanes provisions. And so there was a push to have more meaningful clawback provisions, and that's exactly what we got under Dodd-Frank. The problem, however, is the Dodd-Frank statute itself. If you look at the statutory rules for the clawback provisions, they are literally 3 sentences long. So essentially, although they say clawback includes incentive compensation, there's not much there. The real rules are created through the regulations, which again, we don't have yet, but now we know come April, Those proposed rules are targeted to be released. And when that happens, that is going to be one of the biggest things that's happened in the exec comp world in quite a while. We haven't had specific legislation like that in quite a bit. And so every clawback policy in the country is going to have to be reviewed, and most likely everyone rewritten to be in compliance with those new regulations. A couple additional things with this new calendar, the SEC, although they came out with this targeted date, they did caveat and basically said, but don't hold us to this. There is no rule or statutory limit that they have to come up with these rules by any particular time. And as you can see, going all the way back to 2010, we still don't have final rules. So I would expect we're going to be looking for this April date. And it seems that we're going to get those, but it might slide a little bit. But the clawback rules in particular, we did have those proposed rules, as I mentioned, back in 2015. If we take that for a clue of to what to expect, which may or not be accurate, we can say that the new clawbacks are going to pertain to all executive officers. That might be Section 16 officers, undefined. We'll see. It will go back 3 years instead of 1 year. And a simple financial restatement, when I say simple, there's some additional requirements to that, but there's no language in that statute that requires actual negligence. So it just says a clawback is required of excessive incentives that were paid above what would have been paid except for the financial restatement. So there are many, many definitional issues, things that have not been addressed, including everything from the whole process. Is the board and the governance committee and the comp committee, all three you would think would need to be involved with a top executive clawback situation like that, but there's no rules yet for that by statute. And then how do you define the clawback, what it is and what value and how do you value that? But there are so many different issues inherent with this policy that when these proposed or final rules come out, we're gonna have a lot to do.
You know, my impression was that there were a lot of companies that hoped that these non-finalized rules would just sort of disappear and life would move on. But it sounds like that's not going to be the case. The other thing that the people I've talked to, that the real issue is some have been very proactive and gone about setting up their clawback, programs and whatever. And some of them now with even the slightest change of the review is going to have to spend all that time sort of redoing their current clawback policy. So covering what you just said, Bob, what would you recommend that comp committees and the boards do today other than just watch for the April date?
Right. So two statements there that I agree with. Nothing says that they will absolutely come out with these rules, although, boy, they're giving us a lot of indication that will be the case. The fact that it's been all these years and we still don't have them, and there is no deadline by statute. They may never come out with the rules. And bottom line, you're exactly right. Your second statement, 85% of named public companies in the U.S. have created clawback policies because of these the statute way back in 2010. And most of them did not fully comply. They put rules in at the end of it, caveated and said, our intention is to be in compliance with the rules. Of course, not knowing what the rules completely are, that's impossible. So I think two things. It could be April will come and go and we don't have these final proposed rules, or we do have them and there's so many questions, they're going to have to go back, retract, have another comment period, or the SEC react to. They're going to get a lot of comments before they finalize the rules. So there may be still time here, but I think at the end of the day, we are going to see them somewhere around April, maybe 3 months thereafter. And the fact that most companies put clawback policies in place, they are almost all of them have to not just be reviewed, they're going to have to be revised. What do you do between now and then? I would suggest you really don't do much. Refamiliarize yourself what you've got, how it works, what plans and programs it's in. Are they in award agreements or otherwise? Just to be prepared to really jump in and identify how you might need to change your program. And as I mentioned already, the process is going to be so important. That might be something to start thinking about. And let me say one additional thing. There's a second rule. It's not just clawbacks. There's a secondary pay for performance proxy disclosure. which similarly also in the Dodd-Frank statute, it's only got a couple of sentences within the statute. So it too leaves a lot of the interpretation to the regulations. That, in my opinion, is busy work more than anything. But that rule too, everybody's going to need to comply with. And that also is scheduled to come out in April of 2022. And it simply compares companies' total shareholder return, TSR, to pay. And you would think they would pick up pay in the summary comp table, but it's not. They are modifying the pension and the long-term incentive values, and they're doing a separate line for CEO. But then all the other NEOs, the proposal back in 2015 was to combine those into one line. So it really was hard to interpret any meaningful pay for performance relationship when you've got 4 or more executives combined together. But you need a peer group to define the market TSR as well. So there are complications with that rule. Almost no one has attempted to model that. There's really been no need to do that. But just note that's going to create another new proxy disclosure that's going to be pretty material and take up a few pages.
I hope everyone is updated now on this, because I assume the rumor mill, as this discussed, is going to get heavier and heavier about what's going on. And Bob, you and I need to put April 2022 on our calendar, because that sounds like a big enough event that we should have you back to talk about sort of what's the current status on the projected date right now. So if you'll put that on your calendar, I'll make sure that we get back together.
Very good, TK. I will do that. And thanks for having me.
Well, it's our pleasure. And that will conclude this edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. We hope you enjoyed the show. We will be back again next week when we take another look at a critical topic to help you be a better board member or committee member. So we'll see you then.